thanks for watching Fashion Me Green TV, the place for style and sustainability without sacrifice. I'm Greta Egan, and today my guest is Tara Mackey. Tara, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
So excited.
So Tara is the best-selling author of this book right here, Cured by Nature, which I have been devouring over the past week. Excited to talk to you about that. She is a wellness coach, a public speaker, a singer, and the talented blogger behind theorganiclife.com. With a biology background and a holistic approach to life, Tara is constantly exploring nature's remedies on how to heal, transform, and nurture yourself. You have an incredible story that's super inspiring. I know you've shared it a lot, and so maybe you can just give us a little soundbite about where you're coming from, and then what through that experience, because I know in the book it's shared, inspired you to write and share this book.
Of course, yeah. No, I'm happy to share it. I was put on my first pharmaceutical at the age of 13 years old. By the time I was 24, I was on 14 different pharmaceuticals, 12 of which were to be taken every single day, 2 of which kind of take them as needed, if you're in pain or something. And that was spurred, my first pharmaceutical was spurred by the fact that, so I was born on drugs. My mom did drugs while she was pregnant with me. She was an alcoholic and drug addict growing up. She overdosed in front of me on heroin by the time I was 6, and so then by the time I was 7, my grandparents had custody of me, which involved going to court and testifying against my mom when I was 6 years old. So not the easiest upbringing, definitely not idyllic, and I was sent to therapy at a young age, but I think when I was 13, I had seen my mom overdose and or relapse in front of me again on alcohol, and very shortly after I was sent to a psychiatrist and prescribed lithium, and it just escalated from there. At 16, I was on 2 drugs, at 17, I was on 3 drugs, at 20, I was on 8 drugs, and so yeah, at 24, I saw myself just kind of taking a pill for every uncomfortable sensation, every pain, every mood, every little anxiety, and was really finally inspired to quit my medication cold turkey, which I do not recommend, especially 14 different pills that you've been on for 11 years. Don't do it. It's really horrible. You'll go through withdrawal symptoms that are worse than opiate withdrawal, worse than alcohol withdrawal, worse than anything. So what inspired me to write the book was that I found natural alternatives to all the drugs that I used to take for some of the most commonly prescribed drugs on this planet for pain, anxiety, depression, moods, muscle relaxers, and nerve blockers and things like that. And I found their natural substitute, natural alternative. I've been pharmaceutical drug-free for 5 years, and I want to let other people know that they can go down that path too if they wish.
Yeah. So, wow, that is a lot. That's incredible.
That's my soundbite version.
I know.
That's my elevator pitch.
I just can't. I mean, imagine 14 different drugs before you're even 25 years old. That's insane.
10 pounds less than this, at least, too.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is the healthiest I've ever been. I was like, and my body knew it. My body was shutting down. I was in the hospital for, septic kidney infections and stuff by the time I was 21, every, 6 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
When I, was especially dehydrated. But what it does, not only are they doing what they're doing in your mind, but they're dehydrating your body, they're overworking your kidneys and your liver, and these things you really need to not only process what you're putting in your body, but to function optimally, which is the point of taking the drugs to begin with.
So, and when you were prescribed these drugs, did they basically think that you would be taking these the rest of your life?
The rest of my life. I was told by my child psychiatrist at 13 that what I had was equivalent to cancer. It was like a chronic diagnosis, and that I would need to be on medication for the rest of my life, and that should I ever become pregnant, then we'd talk about it down the road, because a lot of these drugs you can't stay on while you're pregnant or nursing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a road I always figured I'd have to cross eventually coming off of them, but not something that I really thought I was going to end up doing so early in life.
So what was it that prompted you? I mean, what was it inside you or circumstantially that really was the tipping point where you were like, I don't want to do these, I don't want to be on these drugs anymore?
Well, my best friend had taken her life in January of 2011. And then in March of 2011, I attempted to take my life. not smart, and not the way out, I think is what I realized in the moment was like, this didn't help anything. Now I just have these ugly scars that I have to deal with, and when I tried to die, I didn't feel any kind of relief. I actually felt like numbness and almost like a panic, which is exactly the feeling I was trying to escape from. So I realized that like this is not the solution to this heap of problems that I'm facing, that are both mental and spiritual and physical and emotional. I have to start figuring out what's wrong with me. Like when I first came off the drugs, my intention was not to stay off of them forever, actually. My intention was to figure out what drugs I might need and what drugs I might not need. And the only way to do that was kind of like an elimination diet of all the drugs. And then to say, okay, well, I'm still in pain, or I'm still anxious, or I'm still moody, and maybe I should go back on this or that. And it only took me a few weeks before I realized that like nature actually had the solutions to all the things I've been taking pills for, and then hoping and praying and wishing and wondering why they weren't working. The things I found in nature actually worked, and I didn't have to hope and wish and pray that they were working. They were working. So I didn't have to go back to the drugs, and that was the big revelation, I think, especially going through withdrawals where you're like, not that I want to take them to feel better, but I want to take them because if I know for a fact what I'm going through right now is because I'm not on them. So a few weeks later, I definitely, had a relapse moment where I thought about taking them again, and then in that moment decided like, no, because I'll be right here again. Whether it's 2 weeks from now, or 2 years from now, or 2 decades from now, like I will be here, and I will be worse because I will have taken drugs for the whole time, and I'll have to do this again anyway. So I might as well do it now while I'm young, and like I can possibly, still make something of my life and be healthy.
Yeah, well, it's really, and that's what's so incredible is that you had the motivation to make that change, which, I think people can be on the verge of that, wanting to make that change, knowing that being on these drugs can't be good for them, or it's not something that they want to do for the rest of their life, but then how do they actually make that transition away from the pharmaceuticals back to what nature has supplied with us, or for us rather, to treat.
Yeah, my book starts with the Yogananda quote. I know you're a Yogananda fan. There supplies me with everything I need. And that's true for all of us, is that even the drugs that you're taking, they were synthesized from a natural alternative because the drug companies can't patent a plant, can't patent a flower, can't patent an herb, but they can patent a drug. So knowing that everything you've ever taken for any ailment you've ever had has a natural equivalent, and then maybe just figuring out what that is, it look like this, and is some of the first steps that I took to wellness.
Yeah, and I would definitely recommend your book and even your blog, theorganiclife.com, as a resource for people who are starting to sort of awaken to this idea of there's an alternative and I can do this in a better or healthier way that doesn't require a prescription drug. So through your experience, you're still so young, but you've seen and lived through so much, and you have your own process, and you have the process of people around you that you've experienced and witnessed. What, through all of this, have you learned about human suffering?
Definitely that it's inevitable, but that there are things that we can do to process it and to help us to grow. So without suffering, without problems, without little things throughout our day that challenge us, we don't have any reason to grow, any reason to change, any reason to become better. So I think seeing things that may happen, like tragic events, or even just small problems, as things that are here to shape you and to grow you, and are just I like to think of problems as just like unsolved life lessons. Just a life lesson you haven't figured out yet. That's what your problem is. And I think looking at them that way and taking that mental shift of like, I used to panic. Anytime like anything happened, I would panic. It didn't matter what the heck it was. I was looking for an opportunity to panic. And I think now I look for opportunities to solve problems. I love problem solving. I've always kind of loved problem solving, but I didn't realize I could apply that to not just like a test or something, but my own life. And then to make my own life better, to make my own business better, to be able to do what I want to do, regardless of what comes up, because I'm a good problem solver, and I, have made it my intention to be able to deal with anything that comes my way, even if it's one of the hardest things that I've ever had to face. So instead of hopelessness, I think hanging on to the idea that we all have the capability of shaping our own lives and dealing with anything that comes our way is something that I hope humanity awakens to.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, it seems to be a theme right now where people don't want to focus on if they're sad or if they're going through a loss or if they're grieving, or that it's not okay to have these symptoms, to be anxious or to be depressed, and that they need to be treated. But maybe they don't necessarily need to be treated. Maybe in some cases they do, and maybe with herbs or different practices that can help. But also, like, giving yourself the permission to actually feel it.
Yeah.
Because it might be important for you to feel it.
Yeah, and not labeling your feelings. I think for me, anytime I, had a panic, I was like, that's a panic attack. Or anytime I felt some way, I was like, oh, that's bipolar disorder, or that's depression. And it's not. It's just life. It's like we all have feelings, and labeling our feelings, I think, is very harmful. Labeling, like, a kid's curiosity as ADD or an inability to pay attention when they may just be focused on, things that really help them actually grow and learn later on or develop as people, we're doing ourselves a huge disservice. And not taking the time. When my dad passed, I took 6 months for myself to, I was off social media and I didn't blog and I didn't do anything but what I really felt like I needed to do. And it was, I gave myself mentally 6 months, and then exactly 6 months later, I flew back home to New York where my family's from. The first time I was home since the funeral, and that was for me, that was like a huge deal, because I really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to mentally process being back home without him for the first time. Because when I went back, he was alive when I first went back, and then he passed, in front of me, and then we did the whole funeral. So going back was a humongous deal, and the first day that I woke up there, I opened my laptop and I had gotten an email from my publishing company asking if I'd ever thought about writing a book. Like, the month that I told myself I was going to be able to kind of get back into it mentally, and had made room for myself and had prepared myself to get into a project like this, which does involve so much reflection and thought and sacrifice and alone time, that, those things don't just happen. I think giving ourselves the permission, like you were saying, giving ourselves the space to feel things and not feel guilty about them or not label them, and just know that we're human beings, we're having an experience, this is life. Things are not easy all the time, but they also don't have to be sad all the time either.
Mm-hmm. So when I went to buy your book, I was in the bookstore and I thought maybe I'd find it in the wellness section or the self-help, and I actually found it in the psychology section, which it surprised me at the time, but now having read the book and really gotten into what you're talking about here, I understand it. And a lot of it is coming from this mental, psychological place of strength, of building strength. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit of your own processes or your formula for creating happiness, from your mindset.
Definitely. The book is very involved, and there's so many steps to take, I think. But giving yourself the time for, it doesn't even have to be meditation, although I think it's better when we call it that, because it gives us a little bit more of like a drive to make sure it's a meditative process where we're, in a quiet space and we really have the opportunity to listen to ourselves, is a really, really great first step, because that's where we can, as I like to say, create these tools where we can stand guard at the door to our own mind. So meditation and quiet time gives us the opportunity to really figure out, where our discomfort or anything we want to change about our life or our problems even are coming from, and then being able to use those answers to protect ourselves from negative people and negative energy and things that may subconsciously sneak in, things we see on TV, things we see on the news, advertisements we pass by when we're driving around, things we hear on the radio. I mean, there's so many little sneaky, negative, subconscious things that are constantly happening that we don't have too much control over. So taking the time to build that control, build what that protection means for you, so that you constantly can say like, nope, I'm not letting this thought in today. Not this negative thought. No, thank you. That's the one that destroyed the last 10 years of my life. And recognizing them, because I didn't even recognize that so much of my thought patterns were what was building my depressive attitude and my inability to overcome all these things in my life that I really needed to overcome if I wanted to get to any kind of place where I was happy or successful.
So did you, I mean, in creating that, as you were saying, not letting a thought in or identifying when you have a negative thought, did you create sort of a little practice for yourself, or were you, like very actively when you had a negative thought replacing it with a positive thought, or what were some of like your tactics that maybe my viewers would appreciate, or myself?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good start. So replacing with a positive thought, I know it sounds like a little hokey or even like a little too good to be true or a little too easy to be true of like, well, if I'm in this dark place, how am I even going to conjure up these positive thoughts? And I think flipping them is one of my favorite tactics, and trying to find a new perspective on things. I think we all have this creative energy that we're not really sure what to do with, and I think we may not be putting it in the right direction of things like problem solving and doing creative things for ourselves so that we can get over it. So like, for instance, if something bad happens, thinking, this is a bad moment, this is not a bad day. And things like that. I mean, those were the first like self-loving things I really did for myself, was thinking like, okay, I stubbed my toe, that sucks, but that doesn't mean the rest of my day is going to suck. The rest of my day is going to be amazing because I just stubbed my toe, and I'm going to make sure the rest of my day is amazing because I'm not letting my toe get in the way of the rest of my day. And that's really what we're normally focused with, or faced with, is that we end up focusing on something negative that happens in the moment and carrying that throughout our day or our week or our life.
Yeah.
A lot of us carry it throughout our whole lives, and that's why when a lot of people say to me, like, I'm very impressed with what you've been able to get over in your past, like, those were moments in my past. A lot of those things that I speak about right now happened a very long time ago, and I have to acknowledge that, because if I keep carrying that around with me, and creating that as a part of my identity, then I'm never going to move on, and I'm never going to move forward, and I'm never going to be able to use those things that happen to teach myself and teach other people how to get over them and live better lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's another interesting topic, which is, not living in the past, which I've heard, if you live in the past, it's, that's sort of where depression lies. Maybe if you're looking at experiences that were hard, or you're sort of reliving them, the loss or whatever.
Yeah.
And then if you're looking too far in the future, then that can be a place where anxiousness lives, because you're like, oh, what's going to happen, and am I going to get this thing, or what if I don't get this thing, or
Most anxiety comes from future tripping.
Yeah. So it's sort of like this balance of finding the place. Okay, acknowledge what happened in the past, and then just sort of leave it there, and then look forward to the future and make plans, but don't get so wrapped up in it. And it's like finding that sweet spot of being in the present where you can find happiness.
Yeah, I like to make like small little personal promises to myself about the future, not like this is what's going to happen. I like to make personal little promises like, I'm not going to let somebody do that to me again, or I'm not going to tolerate this kind of behavior from somebody in my life, or, I'm going to make sure that I travel this much in the next 6 months. I don't necessarily have to say where to, or I'm going to go to Hawaii in 2 months, or I'm going to be happy if I go to, Bora Bora, but like leaving myself the opportunity for, okay, at some point, this thing, I'm going to manifest this thing, and I'm going to make sure that in that moment, I let it, I totally absorb it, and I let it allow me to create happiness around the events. I mean, that's about as future trippy as I try to get nowadays. Because, other than that, people that are disappointed are mostly people who, have high expectations of the future. And that's not to say you shouldn't have high goals or high expectations of what those goals or successes will mean to you. I have tons of goals that are like, shoot for the moon. And I work towards them, but I don't freak out if they don't happen on my timeline. So I think just giving part of it up to the universe, and then making sure that you're working on creating the other part of it, is like the only way that stuff happens. Because if you focus on it way too much, it's just not even going to happen. Yeah,
and staying in the day-to-day of enjoying the process of creating it.
Right.
Yeah. So speaking of being in control of what you let in, and even the environments you're in, one of the things we were talking about earlier that I'd love to share is toxic people, how to identify them. I mean, I think we can kind of all identify them, but then really like how to eliminate them or sort of get them out of your life. And that's more easily said than done.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you have any wise words about it.
Definitely. I've had to eliminate a lot of toxic people out of my life. The majority of the friends I had when I first started this journey were very toxic people. That's what I was attracting. I was attracting toxic things. And a lot of the times when you go to first make your changes, those are the exact people that are going to say, you don't really want to go to the gym today, do you? Or like, oh, come on, let's just go get some fast food together or something when you're trying to make like a really big life change. And they try to kind of pull you down and act like it's no big deal. But they're recognizing that you're changing, and a lot of times they don't want you to. And I think that's how we can most easily recognize toxic people in our life. They're the people who discourage us from healthy habits. That's what I found in my life, or the people who are just so focused on their own misery that they don't even really have room for caring about you the way that you need them to. Those are the two most common forms of toxic people, and I think personally, just walk away. Like I know, I'm kind of rude about it. I've been like a little rude to people, honestly, and I have a few people, especially back home on Long Island, that may not like me very much because at the time I really was just like, I have to get everybody out of my life. I'm so sorry. You guys are not the friends I need right now. I'm not saying those exact words, but that's the impression they got, and as they should have, because that's exactly what I was thinking at that time. That doesn't mean they're bad people or they don't have other friends. They're friends with tons of other people right now. But I think just recognizing that you need to match up energies with people that you're around, or you're constantly going to be exhausted, you're constantly going to be battling each other, you're constantly going to be getting into fights and then wondering, like, why do I hate and kind of love this person and stuff, and what a waste of time. I think honestly, like, just attracting, the second I got toxic people out of my life, I really started to attract exactly the people I needed. Like, one of the first friends I made was the person that ended up convincing me to come to California with them and help me find a place to live, and introduced me to Autobiography of a Yogi and started making music together, and like that was the first friend I made, you know what I mean? And then every friend I've made after that has been just as amazing, just as open, and really on the same wavelength as I am. And I think that does start to happen, but it doesn't start to happen if you have even like one toxic person still lurking around, because the good people in your life end up sitting around and listening about how your one friend sucks, and then they don't really want to stick around you either, you know? So I think just making the commitment and letting people know that, like, you know, sometimes you're just not good in each other's lives right now. I have people I stopped being friends with 10 years ago, and we've both changed so much, and now we're best friends. But in the last 10 years, we wouldn't have gotten along at all. So I think not thinking about losing people as like a permanent thing, but just, hey, what's best for me? What kind of people do I want in my life? Because I don't think anybody really wants toxic people in their life, because they're draining and they're a waste of time.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the other thing when you were speaking that occurred to me, I've just been reading a book where the author said that when you know, sometimes things leave your life to make space for something new. Like they're like a placeholder. So
Yes.
like, you know, that person who, you know, at that time was a good fit for your life, or was, you know, took space in your life and occupied that place. Doesn't need to occupy that space anymore, because it needs to free it up for someone else. Like you had said, like this new friend came in, and that's sort of, yeah, you're doing like a little bit of housekeeping or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Your whole sort of approach in this book and the methodologies that you've employed and what you're sort of speaking to is about creating a happy life, you know, a life that you want to live, that you're proud to be, you know, living. And it takes a lot of work, and you have to show up for it, and you have to, you know, do that hard work to look at yourself and to identify when things are, you know, mentally not supporting you, or people or places, and to change them. So you talk a lot about that, which I found super helpful.
Thank you.
And my question is, though, you know, with that focus on being happy and being healthy and creating that life, when do you and how do you give yourself permission to be sad?
Excellent question. And I think a lot of people wouldn't really know this about me, because I do have, you know, I try to be as happy as I can all the time, and I carry happiness and light into everything I do, but I also give myself those moments to be sad as often as I need them. I think a huge part of the reason why, you know, I'm a writer, and so I do spend a lot of time kind of alone and at home and a little hermity, and I'm not ashamed about it. Like, I try not to, just because I'm sad, I try not to feel like because I'm sad in that moment, I'm a sad person, or I'm a depressed person, or this is a depressive moment or something. Like, I just let it happen. But I try to give myself a time limit. Like I said, even when my dad passed away, I was like, okay, I'm gonna give myself 6 months to not get over it, but to process it. I know it doesn't take 6 months, there's no timeline. So I think, knowing that I have to get to a happy place at the end of this regardless. So I'm gonna let myself feel it now, but I'm not going to take this on as part of my identity.
Yeah, I think, that's super powerful, to let yourself feel it, to let that be okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that in society, we just have such a stigma against letting yourself feel this way. That's why they prescribe all those drugs.
They label your emotions. Yeah. And I think it's harmful labeling our emotions. I really do. I think it's harmful labeling feeling depressed as having clinical depression and things like that. I mean, labeling every time you have anxiety as an anxiety attack, maybe it is an anxiety attack, but it starts somewhere. It didn't start as an anxiety attack, it started as anxiety. So I think just taking the time to recognize our feelings but not to label them was the first step for me, because I was so used to just labeling my feelings. Oh, I feel this way, take this pill. And the pill is not the answer. I mean, you have to figure out what the answer is for yourself. It's slightly different for everybody, but the formula is the same, and the formula is taking the time to acknowledge what you're going through and why it affects you this way, and what you can do in the future to, be productive about it when it does come up for you.
Mm-hmm. And to learn from it, maybe, like you said, why is it showing up for you?
Yeah.
What are you supposed to learn from that? Yeah. This question ties into kind of what we were just talking about, which is less about you as the individual if you're moving through something challenging or hard, but how do you, and then maybe you can sort of phrase it as like, how do we, like, what would you suggest that we do to support those in our lives who are going through challenging times?
Definitely, that's a great question. To support other people, you mean, and support ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, taking it, I think we've talked a lot about the self and how to support ourselves and move through that, which is so powerful. And then it's sort of like, outside of ourselves, then noticing the people around us who might be going through a challenging time, friends or family, how do you best support them?
That's a great question. And I think definitely there's a few different ways, but I think listening is like just one of my favorite methods of just letting people vent. I mean, a lot of people just need somebody to talk to, truthfully. I really needed somebody to talk to at the beginning, and luckily some of the very first non-toxic friends I made were there to listen to me, and without them I don't really know what I would have done. I mean, I had one friend where I literally just would sit with him for like 4 hours when I was first going through stuff and just like talk about all this crazy crap I'd seen when I was young and stuff, and regardless of whether or not he wanted to hear that, he was there to listen to it, and I appreciate that even to this day more than anything. And I try to do that for other people as much as I can, because I've noticed at my book signings and at my speaking engagements and my tours that that's mostly what people need.
So actually my last question is about manifesting. I just feel like you are such a little manifester. You're a big manifester.
That's crazy.
And so would you share some of your tips and processes for manifesting the life and the happiness and the things that you desire that you want to bring into your life?
Totally. Yeah, it's one of my favorite little topics, because I used to think it was so woo-woo and weird and didn't really happen and didn't exist. But just like anything, I mean, I like to, say the law of gravity is a lot like the law of attraction. And the law of attraction is manifestation. And there's a science behind it. There really is. Just like there's a science behind why an apple falls from a tree and hits the ground. I mean, you may not be able to see it or even have a mathematical equation for it, but it's true, it's undeniable, and the law of attraction works exactly the same way, and manifestation works exactly the same way. So my favorite tips are writing it down. I know this sounds like so simple and so insane, but I just had something happen recently where I had this huge goal I wanted, and I have this trip to New York coming up, and it kind of had to happen on this trip, and I was like, God, I just want this so bad, so bad, so bad. And I was thinking about it for weeks, and every 11/11 that came up, I was wishing for it, and all this stuff, and I'm like, you know what I should do? I should write it down. So I made a list, and I put it, at the top, and I told a few people about it too. That's my second advice, is if you have something you really, 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 really want more than anything, share it with a few select people. Don't share it with the whole universe. Don't put it on social media. just share it with people who will help you with that intention, like your significant other or your parents if you have supportive parents, or somebody who is kind of in the game with you, or your best friend. And so my experience, even with writing it down, I would say I wrote it down like 3 weeks ago, and 2 weeks ago it happened. So it happened so quickly. It was so crazy because I've wanted it for years, and then the second I wrote it down, it was like, 5-6 days later that it came into my life. So, and we don't do enough writing, I don't think, just as people anymore. We're so tablet oriented and phone oriented that it's easy to be like, oh, I typed it, that's fine. It's not the same thing. The kinesthetic experience of writing it down and then having it there to look at, I think. I always put it in a place where I'll see it every day, but that it won't annoy me. So I'll just like leave it on a table in the living room or in the kitchen somewhere, hung up, where it's not in my face in that you don't have this yet, but it's there kind of like brewing and manifesting itself for the day that, it's willing to let me know that it's in my life now. So that's my favorite advice to give to people, and I know it sounds really simple, but just try it. I guarantee you it will work.
So just write it down, leave it in an open place where you see it, and you're sort of able to affirm it and reaffirm it.
And tell a friend or tell your parents, that this is something you really, really want. And I would have like a small timeline for it. I want in the next 5 years, I want in the next 2 years or something, if it's like your dream house or your dream car, something larger, like a larger goal. But if it's a small, manageable goal, which is what I started with, I remember one of the first things I did was when I quit my job before I moved out here, I was like, God, I'm gonna need money to move to California. So I wrote down, like, I want a job, but I don't want a job where it's like 9 to 5 and I have to I'm like a slave to it or whatever. And I ended up getting this absolute perfect job where I was basically freelance working for Inside Edition, like undercover, from like 12 o'clock in the afternoon to like 5 o'clock at night, and they would just drive me to and from the city, and I didn't have to really go out of my way to do anything, and they were paying me 10 times more money than what I'd been making at my last job, and I was just like, just write it down. I guess that's all you gotta do.
Ask and you shall receive.
Ask and you shall receive. Bob said best.
Awesome. Okay, well, Tara, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an absolute pleasure, and for anyone who is interested, if this conversation resonated with you, definitely pick up a copy of Cured by Nature. It is a gem, and I know that we are going to be hearing more from you, possibly another book in the future.
Yes,
more books in the future.
My second book right now, and actually my third book proposal. So lots more books. There's
Yay,
so many
good.
books. Yeah.
Well, you are a font of wisdom, so I'm excited for you to share and keep sharing with us.
Thank you, and I hope to be back, and I'm sure we'll hang out at lunch.
Definitely. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, leave your comments in the comment section, and we can keep this conversation going.